Chapter 17. In Platonic parlance, the main initiatory and philosophical goal of fallen humanity consists in the recollection of an ideal beginning and in solar contemplation of the enneatic totality of the ideas. In order to do so, and achieve the desired goal, writing is established by Thoth and Secheta as the instrument of revelation which provides access to the world of the gods. This is simply because it is, at the same time, the instrument of theophany and creation. In fact, the hieroglyphs, Medu Neta, are viewed as traces of noetic being, as archetypes and metaphysical symbols, even epiphanies of the gods themselves. They constitute the revealed body of divine knowledge necessary for salvation. After Ra's departure and the subsequent end of the direct divine rule, the distorted human race lives in a state of punishment and blindness. Hornung describes this as follows, quoting from Eric Hornung's book Idea into Image, page 48. Henceforth war and violence shape the lives of human beings. Having lost the paradisiacal innocence of their beginnings, they can regain access to the world of the gods only in death. Moreover, their rebellion suggests a dangerous threat to the continued existence of creation itself, insofar as it hints at the existence of destructive forces that seek to bring the normal course of events on earth to a halt. End quote. The memory of the divine presence is maintained by means of the Horus-like pharaoh, whose rites enacted in the temple recall the initial foundation of the world as revelation of the divine face. The ritual act of unveiling and adoration of the face establishes the royal paradigm of pious contemplation. The Egyptians, in order to become a holy people, once again need to walk on the water of God, that is, follow the path of the deity, be it Atum-Ra, Amun-Ra, Ta, Khnum, or Sobek, proclaiming God's power even to the fish and the birds. This manifestation of divine power is to be regarded as a kind of revelation, as a miracle to be proclaimed, according to Asman, so that the whole universe is told of the power of God. This all-encompassing proclamation of social ma'at, practice, recollection, and revelation means that the ideal person is one who is, quote-unquote, able to remember. Accordingly, the ritual of the judgment of the dead assumes a kind of manual for the lifestyle and education of the living. The Egyptian initiate hopes to go forth and to see Ra, ritually maintaining the metaphysical memory that conveys the pattern of alchemical transformation, as well as rational calculability, responsibility, and accountability. In this context, the initiate simply means the official member of the pharaonic state who is able to manage and present himself as a substitute, albeit inwardly and mystically, for the king, either ideally patterned as Horus's image or as the mummified and reanimated Osiris image. Finally, through the restored Akh identity, he hopes to be like a living god and stand in the sun bark. Although the standard New Kingdom Egyptian is a politically responsible devotee of Amun and does not feel like a Gnostic stranger in the world, death, Mut, and initiation through the Assyrian suffering and rebirth seems to be his only gateway to the noetic realm of Ra. Asman argues that the gods are to be confronted only by priests indirectly in a statue ritual or directly after death. When the Egyptian in the form of his Ba appeals to the court of Osiris for justice, here quoting Jan Asman's A Dialogue Between Self and Soul, Papyrus, Berlin 3024, in Self, Soul and Body and Religious Experience, 1998, page 388. He does not accuse the gods for his misfortune, nor does he perceive his sufferings as unjust punishment for crimes he did not commit. He knows that the gods do not interfere in human affairs, and that a human being is exposed to all kinds of misfortunes that have nothing to do with the gods and have no religious significance whatsoever. They just occur. The only way to address the gods and to enter into forms of belonging and connectivity that bind him to the gods is to die, and to present himself to the judgment of the dead. Proclus provides the following account, which presents an analogous but different story of royal succession and cyclic regression, based on the myth of the Titanic act of violence. Here, the dismemberment of Dionysus, that partly follows the Osirian pattern, represents the proceeding of the one into the many. Proclus says, here, quoting Velvet Yeats, "The Titanic origin of humans, the Melian nymphs and Zagreus," page 194. Orpheus the theologian had handed down 3 races of man. First the golden, which he says Phanes governed. Second the silver, which he says the mighty Kronos ruled. And third the Titanic, which he says Zeus assembled from the Titanic limbs, thinking that in these 3 categories every form of human life was included. End quote. Yet another version is presented in the so-called rhapsodic theogony. In a related prayer to Apollo Helios at the beginning of the Orphic Rhapsodies, this poem is described as the 12th revelation of Orpheus. According to this Orphic theogony, current among the late Neoplatonists, especially Proclus, Damascius, and Olympiodorus, there are 6 successive divine kingdoms ruled by Phanes, Night, Uranos, Kronos, Zeus, and Dionysus, respectively. Phanes reigns before Night in this account, and his reign, understood both metaphysically and as a pedagogical myth of perfect politeia, is somewhat analogous to the reign of Ra. Dionysus corresponds to Osiris, who comes back to life at the level of Anima Mundi, not only as a ruler of Duat, the netherworld, tantamount to his own or Nut Hathor's body temple, but also as a model for the deceased, that is, for the quote-unquote initiate and quote-unquote philosopher. The main difference between the Egyptian and the Hellenic models is that the attainment of life, Ankh, in the Noetic Heliopolis, depends not only upon knowledge and piety, but first of all upon service to the Egyptian holy state, and to the pharaoh, the son of Ra, suckled by the goddess Hathor, in the form of the Ka statue, located within the special mansions, wrongly designated as quote-unquote mortuary temples by modern scholars. He is expected to spend quote-unquote millions of years in mystic union with the deity. His mummy, the symbolic image of Osiris, is the exemplary receiver of life, Shesep rank, of the reviving solar rays, thus becoming his hieroglyphic spell generating his immortality, and showing the theurgic way to his initiates, the bureaucratic and priestly staff. In this respect he is the death-conquering immortal Horus, the golden falcon, as Alan Siegel remarks, quoting Alan Siegel's Life After Death, A History of the Afterlife in Western Religion, 2004, page 50. Eventually, ordinary Egyptians understood themselves and the transcendent part of their lives by imitating the pharaoh's path through the underworld. The afterlife became the mirror of the self. End quote. Since the true and eternal life begins, or rather is regained, only with death, the term Anku, the living ones, as Gerard Haney actually surmises, is used in a double sense. Quoting the same text, page 92, of those alive on earth as well as of those living in the hereafter.